Thanks so much, Katie, and good morning, afternoon, or evening, everyone. Thank you for sharing part of your day with us today. As Katie said, my name is Brittany Ajrud, and I am the Chief of Party for the Sustainable Wash Systems Learning Partnership, or SWS. I'll be kicking off today's session. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to everyone to our Closeout event and learning series. We look forward to engaging you over the next 2 weeks in a discussion on local wash systems and service sustainability. Before we start, I'll do just a quick run through of the BlueJeans platform, just to make sure this is accessible and comfortable for everyone so we have your fullest possible participation. Okay, so first, I do need to let you know this event is being recorded. However, all participants are automatically muted and your cameras are switched off, so you will not be visible in the recording. If at any point you're experiencing issues with the BlueJeans platform, please just let us know via the moderator chat, and someone from our tech support team will be available to answer your questions and help with troubleshooting. If you want to make either the speaker video or presentation larger, you can adjust using the slider at the bottom of your screen. You can ask questions using the Q&A box. We will be collecting these to ask our speakers after they finish their presentations. If you haven't yet introduced yourself in the chat, please do so we can get a sense of who's in the room today, and we encourage you to continue to use this feature to interact with other attendees. And lastly, I want to share a few norms for virtual engagement. First, we recommend placing devices out of reach and closing other windows on your computer to avoid distractions. Second, we would love to continue to see an active dialogue in the chat box. A couple of shortcuts you can use for today's session are a +1 to indicate agreement, an @ sign to build off of a comment, or a negative sign to indicate you have a different perspective. Finally, feel free to use emojis to give our speakers some instant feedback with, for example, a thumbs up. So our vision for this closeout event is to share what SWS has learned around strengthening wash systems to sustain services, to celebrate our achievements, and to reflect on some challenges we encountered to support future research and efforts in the sector. Over the next 2 weeks, we will highlight research and evidence garnered through the partnership, including on the priority topics of building understanding of local systems, professionalized maintenance of rural water systems, and collective action approaches that leverage partnership among WASH stakeholders. We'll also share bright spots and lessons learned from SWS partners that reflect the challenges of implementing a systems approach, promote some of our flagship resources, many of which are hot off the press and have just recently been published on Global Waters. And finally, we hope to connect with all of you and build and strengthen relationships in the sector. Today is the first of 5 virtual sessions. We'll be kicking things off with an overview of SWS and highlighting the work and achievements of our partners. This will be followed by 3 deep dive sessions indicated by the blue box on this calendar on the topics of systems understanding and engagement, professionalized maintenance, and collective action. Our last session will summarize learning across the event, recommend next steps for the sector, and explain how you can stay involved. We'll also be continuing the conversation between sessions with some targeted emails, and I'll share more about that at the end of today's session. During this closeout event, you'll be hearing from multiple members of the SWS Learning Partnership, as well as experts from other organizations and institutions in the wash and system sectors. You can access biographies for all of our speakers at a Google site we created for this event, and we'll go ahead and add that link to the chat now. I would encourage you to bookmark it to easily return to for future sessions. Now for today's agenda. In a moment, I'll hand over to Sam Houston from USAID to provide a keynote address. We'll then hear from Carl Linden and Amy Jabernick-Will from the University of Colorado at Boulder, who will present an overview of the project, and their presentation will be bolstered by testimonials from our partners on bright spots, challenges, and lessons learned from the last 5 years of implementation. We'll end with a facilitated Q&A, a quick 1-question survey, and a preview of what's to come in the next few days. So I'll now turn it over to Sam Houston to provide our keynote address. Sam serves as Division Chief of Water and Sanitation Technical Services for USAID Center for Water Security, Sanitation, and Hygiene. We've asked Sam to discuss what USAID hoped to learn and achieve through this partnership and reflect on some of what was accomplished. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. My pleasure to speak with all of you today, and I'm very much looking forward to this discussion and the coming sessions in this series. These events present a significant opportunity to share learning from USAID's Sustainable Wash Systems and Learning Partnership, SWS, which I trust will both be thought-provoking and informative, and engaging as well. We know from experience that all too often, national and local governments, service providers, and development organizations traditionally focused on access and service expansion. Less emphasis has been placed on sustaining existing services and infrastructure. Unfortunately, this often results in low service functionality rates as infrastructure quickly falls into disrepair. Gone are the days when anyone in the sector can exclusively focus on infrastructure alone, but nor have we arrived at a point when we can be fully confident that all of our investments are fully sustainable, resilient, and viable to scale for universal coverage. While the evidence base for effective WASH programming continues to grow, knowledge gaps do continue to hinder the ability of the sector to expand and sustain WASH services. On top of this, gaps in service coverage remain significant, and implementation challenges are growing with climate change, COVID, and conflict. Research to fill evidence gaps in the application of that learning are both critical to inform how USAID and its partners can help underserved people and communities to work towards sustainable WASH service delivery. That is why USAID invests in research and learning geared at assessing the effectiveness of emerging systems-based approaches to WASH service delivery. However, I do want to emphasize that our work does not end with learning, but it is only a departure point for us to continue to design, implement, and verify that our knowledge base is robust and in alignment with the evidence from programming and service coverage trends. The SWS Consortium consists of 8 partners, including the University of Colorado Boulder, Environmental Incentives, IRC, Link, Oxford University, Tetra Tech, Watershed, and WAVE. SWS has worked with local partners in Cambodia, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda to understand their systems and test approaches to overcome barriers for improving service sustainability. These include learning how systems understanding and engagement can help service providers navigate the complex challenges to service sustainability, establishing new models for maintenance, maintaining rural water services that incentivize preventive maintenance and fast repair times, and supporting collective action platforms to bring about policy change. Evidence from SWS experience shows that there are promising approaches that can result in improved performance for WASH services. I would like to briefly highlight the following 6 noteworthy areas of learning and achievement from the project. First, in all instances, SWS found that systems assessments are the most important starting point of any WASH intervention. Fully understand layered local context for the creation of sustainable and reliable service. Second, collectively, SWS partners conducted 16 different types of systems assessments, including asset inventory, building block assessments, financial analysis, network analysis, outcome mapping, borehole sensor analysis, and sustainability assessment. These were often participatory and conducted with and validated by local stakeholders. Third, for 5 out of 9 SWS geographies, an end-line assessment showed a significant increase in the likelihood that WASH services will be sustained based on measures of financial, institutional, environmental, technological, and social aspects of sustainability. Additionally, all geographies showed an improvement in the overall strength of the WASH network. Fourth, 2 WASH partners, Fundifix in Kenya and Wave Solutions in Uganda, implemented professionalized maintenance approaches over the project's 5 years. Each demonstrated substantial evidence that by providing scheduled mechanical maintenance and repairs to water infrastructure and systems, rural water supplies and services can remain highly functional and cost-effective with minimal breakdown. Fifth, SWS implemented collective action approaches in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Cambodia, either establishing multi-stakeholder platforms where they did not previously exist, such as setting up learning alliances in 2 small towns in Ethiopia to address sanitation challenges, or strengthening existing platforms, such as formalizing a governance structure for a wash forum in Kitui County in Kenya. And 6, these platforms achieved a wide range of outcomes. Notable outcomes include resolving long-standing conflicts between a water supply and sanitation utility and a municipality to construct fecal sludge disposal sites, developing a 10-year master plan for a district, and successfully advocating for greater resource allocation. These 6 brief examples have highlighted some of the many contributions that SWS has made over its program cycle. Finally, I want to thank the SWS team for their hard work on this important project for USAID. As a former implementer, I know how challenging it can be to advance a complex project and to share learnings across the broad sector that we all work in. I'm sure that all of you will make the most out of this and the upcoming sessions to share learning and experience from SWS efforts. I wish you all very fruitful conversations. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much for those reflections, Sam. I think I can speak for many of us in the room that it's great to see USAID investing in collaboration and learning to help address sustainability issues in the WASH sector. So I'll now transition to our main presenters for today, Carl Linden and Amy Jabernick-Will from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Carl and Amy are the principal investigators for SWS. Carl is a professor in environmental engineering. Through his research, he supports the development of innovative treatment technologies, improvement of water quality, and establishment of enabling environments. Amy is a professor in civil, environmental, and architectural engineering. Her research lies at the intersection of society and built infrastructure, studying the processes that enable sustained, safe service delivery in communities for water, sanitation, and shelter. As a reminder, during their presentation, please ask questions using the Q&A feature, and we will hear from Carl first. So over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Brittany. Welcome to all our attendees. It's really wonderful to have you join us today. The Sustainable Wash Systems Learning Partnership is a cooperative partnership with USAID, and it started in late 2016, and we work in 5 countries. These include Cambodia, Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and the United States. Our team is made up of 8 unique partner organizations. The research and learning team is based at the University of Colorado in Boulder, and we partner with Environmental Incentives and Link in Washington, D.C. And our research and learning field partners include Watershed in Cambodia, WAVE in Uganda, University of Oxford and Fundifix in Kenya, Tetra Tech in Ethiopia, and IRC Wash in Uganda and Ethiopia. We also engaged with a number of expert consultants who were integrated throughout our learning partnership and our learning themes. All told, our team had over 50 members over the 5 years of work, and you'll be hearing from many of them during our closeout event. On our timeline, our learning partnership was incubated back in early 2016, and that was at a USAID co-creation workshop held in Washington, D.C. USAID selected teams to attend this workshop based on their responses via concept notes to the request proposals they had put out. These teams helped USAID define what research and learning about sustainable wash systems could actually look like, and numerous collaborations were formed at that meeting. Following submission of the full proposal, USAID selected a suite of organizations to join together in a consortium and made the award in late 2016 to this consortium. The timeline here highlights many of the keystone events of our partnership over the past 5 years of working together, as well as a few select illustrative milestones for our field activities. We'll be covering many of these milestones later in the presentation with testimonials from our partners. Our first task was to build a community of learning and develop trusting relationships between the diverse set of teams in the partnership. We chose to hold our learning kickoff meeting at the University of Colorado in Boulder to emphasize the focus on research and learning in this cooperative agreement, which differs from a typical USAID development contract. The graduate students from Colorado were assigned to each of our in-country field partners to support their learning activities and develop strong ties throughout the project. And in mid-2019, we defined 4 key learning themes to help us focus our cross-partnership research and learning. These themes, which you'll be hearing about throughout our Closeout event, are stakeholder understanding, collective action, network analysis, and professionalized maintenance services. Each year, following the kickoff meeting, we also held in-country pause and learn meetings with field teams and convened a consortium-wide team meeting. These annual learning events, which we called pause and learn meetings, were consortium-wide meetings, and we hosted them in different locations represented in the partnership and provided an opportunity for all learning partners to interact with their peers, compare experiences across countries, and reflect on our theory of change. In addition, we held these meetings between the researchers at the University of Colorado and the learning specialists from partner organizations at each location. And during these meetings, the partners reviewed progress toward answering our learning questions. We reviewed and reflected on the 4 priority learning topics. We identified any needed course corrections for the coming year's learning activities. When COVID-19 hit, we had to pause all travel, and many of the activities of the research teams were frozen. But we quickly adapted to online virtual meetings, building on the trusting relationships that had built during the initial project years, and continued the research and learning. We learned to love Zoom meetings and WhatsApp messaging. We're very excited to share with you all what we have learned along our journey during this series of Closeout event webinars.
The Sustainable Wash Systems Learning Partnership, SWS, has focused on understanding and strengthening local systems to provide and sustain wash services. Under SWS, the 8 partners that Carl discussed are working collaboratively with USAID to test new ideas, approaches, and tools to strengthen local wash systems, working in partnership with our local stakeholders in Kenya, Ethiopia, Uganda, and Cambodia in order to improve service sustainability. Our partnership has focused on systems approaches because sustaining outcomes depends on the contributions of multiple and interconnected actors. Under SWS, we start with the premise that strengthening a local system means engaging with the actors in that system to understand the system and collectively identify needs and priorities. Act based upon this understanding to strengthen the system, both by strengthening collaboration of actors and addressing key factors such as financing that helps or inhibits sustainability. Along the way, we're adapting and iterating and based upon our measurement of the systems as it changes and responds. And ultimately, we are working to improve service sustainability to reach our goal of more sustainable rural water and small town sanitation services. Next slide.
So under the broad themes of urban sanitation, rural water, and rural sanitation and hygiene, our partnership undertook a number of learning activities, and they're displayed here in orange. Understand, analyze and strengthen, and measure systems change. Here in this diagram, the line thickness represents the number of times a learning activity occurred. For example, we had 62 outcome mapping reports that were completed, along with other learning activities such as network analyses, sustainability scorecards, qualitative comparative analysis, and the many other activities noted here.
In SWS, we have 4 overarching learning themes, including increasing stakeholder understanding through systems and network analysis, professionalized service models, and collective action approaches. This learning was a collaboration between USAID, the University of Colorado, our cross-concept leads, and most importantly, our in-country partners to study lessons across the consortium.
SWS conducted a rigorous study to explore how stakeholders conceptualize the interconnected factors that hinder or enable sustainable wash and sanitation service delivery. We looked at whether views of factor interactions shifted over time. We analyzed engagement in over 200 learning activities.
For understanding the system, all teams also use network analysis to understand the connections and relationships between the actors. This helped to inform decisions about who should be included in coalitions, what collaborations needed to be supported through interventions, and to monitor and track change in the network structure, actors, and interactions to determine if our interventions were working. We learned lessons about the application and use of network analysis, including the importance of visualizations during coalition discussions. The results of these activities and improvements in stakeholder understanding will be presented in a session this Wednesday, September 22nd.
Another core area of learning for SWS is around maintenance provision toward rural water sustainable services. We hypothesized that sustained improvements in services will only come about by addressing and strengthening the weaknesses of local and national systems. We investigated professionalized maintenance approaches in Uganda, in Ethiopia, and Kenya, led by our partners IRC WASH, Fundifix, and WAVE. Our findings will be presented in our session on Monday, September 27th, a week from today.
Under collective action, we studied factors that collaboratively strengthened WASH systems, as well as the resources that were required to apply these approaches. While we found that there was not one single formula to apply, our research uncovered 5 core elements that worked together in different ways to make progress, including local government uptake, the availability of external funds for the coalition's activities, and continuity and accountability in the coalition's membership, having a hub with convening power, and collaboratively identifying problems and solutions. Please join us as we present our findings for collective action on Wednesday, September 29th. We are also inviting you to our closing session on Thursday, September 30th, where we will tie all of these lessons together. As we mentioned, these themes are being studied across 4 concepts in Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and Cambodia, where we are learning about collective action approaches and professionalized service and maintenance models. We have asked our in-country partners to share their lessons, achievements, and challenges, and how they overcame these challenges. We are excited to share achievements from each of our teams. Should you have questions while we are sharing these, we invite you to ask them in the Q&A tab. We will be addressing these during our Q&A session and responding as we are able in the tab. We're going to begin with achievements from partner WAVE Solutions. WAVE is a rural water maintenance social enterprise operating in 3 districts in Uganda under SWS. WAVE contracts mechanics who provide preventive maintenance services and incentivizes immediate hand pump repairs with performance-based payments. In this testimonial, Elizabeth shares how aspects of WAVE's model were adopted by the national government.
WAVE's area service provider model was adopted in the National Operation and Maintenance Framework for Rural Water Services in December 2019. This was a culmination of working in partnership with district governments for over 7 years to prove that it is possible to achieve reliable functionality in a rural context. We did that by establishing professionalized maintenance services in at least 700 paying communities.
Next, we turn to Kenya, where our SWS partner, the University of Oxford, working together with Rural Focus and UNICEF, worked in Kitui County. Here they worked with the Kitui WASH Forum, demonstrating a model for professionalized rural water maintenance and helping to influence policy development to improve rural water sustainability. Cliff shares these achievements in his testimonial.
Our biggest achievement from our work in Kitui County in Kenya was the successful elevation of the profile of rural water sustainability. Most importantly, we were successful in promoting professionalized maintenance and by showcasing the Fundi Fix model, which is guaranteeing renewable water service for more than 60,000 people in Kitui. We showed that breakdowns can be fixed in under 3 days. A bright spot for our team was the Kitui water policy development process. By showcasing the Fundi Fix model as a solution to the challenge of rural water sustainability, we were able to bring out the lessons learned, and this played a key role in influencing the local water policy development process, providing an enabling environment for private sector participation. Factors such as funding, coordination, contracting, and exclusivity of service area have now been accommodated within the current draft water bill.
SWS had a program in Cambodia from 2016 through 2018. Our partner Watershed drew upon the principles of collective impact and systems thinking to facilitate locally led and owned efforts to strengthen rural sanitation and hygiene service delivery. The team also implemented a leadership development program entitled Fostering Civic Champions, or FCC, to build local WASH leadership and advocacy systems across the country. In this video testimonial, a deputy district governor discusses some key achievements of the FCC program.
Vàសម្រាប់មេរៀនដែលយើងទទួលបាននេះគឺសំខាន់គឺជួយជំរុញទី1បង្កើនធនធានមនុស្សvàបង្កើនកម្រិតវប្បធម៌ដល់ថ្នាក់ដឹកនាំឃុំសង្កាត់របស់យើងកាលណាគាត់ទទួលបានចំណេះដឹងមេរៀនដែលក្នុងភាពជាអ្នកដឹកនាំនេះគឺគាត់យកទៅបម្រើការងារនៅក្នុងឃុំប្រកបនឹងគឺបានច្រើនផ្នែកបាទទី1ដូចជាផ្នែកអនាម័យជំរុញការលើកកម្ពស់អនាម័យសុខភាពដូចជាភាពដឹកនាំក្នុងសាលាឃុំប្រកបអាចក្នុងការផ្ដល់ជាព័ត៌មានចែករំលែកដល់មេភូមិបាទឬក៏ចែករំលែកដល់អ្នកពាក់ព័ន្ធផ្សេងៗទៀតដែលនៅក្នុងការគ្រប់គ្រងឃុំប្រកប
In Ethiopia, partner IRC is working to strengthen decentralized district-level rural water systems in Mile and South Ari Boredas. IRC facilitates multi-stakeholder partnerships referred to as learning alliances, a collective action approach, to develop local stakeholders' understanding of their water service delivery systems and execute a shared learning and action agenda to improve these services. In this testimonial, Lamesa discusses what was achieved through this approach.
Key achievements under SWS Rural Ethiopia includes improved policy-level attention to water infrastructure management, development and endorsement of 4 districts' long-term plan for improved and universal wash services, the establishment of comprehensive and updatable water infrastructure asset database for 4 districts and 1 region, and the establishment of active 4 districts and 1 zone learning alliance platforms.
In Kabarole, Uganda, partner IRC Uganda worked with the Kabarole District WASH Task Team, also using a Learning Alliance approach, to improve coordination and government support and create the district's WASH Master Plan. Our colleague Martin shares reflections on their progress.
SWS Learning Partnership has strengthened the learning about sustainable wash services in the Kabarole district. It has consolidated long-term planning by attracting local government support towards the implementation of the Kabarole District Wash Master Plan. I am proud of the Learning Alliance at the moment that is recognized throughout the district for its contributions.
Finally, SWS partner Tetra Tech, together with IRC and Link, focused on improving the quality and sustainability of small town sanitation services in Waliso and Debre Birhan, Ethiopia, through learning alliances. Here, Lucia shares how learning alliances contributed to creating a fecal dumping site and strengthening the management of public latrines.
One of the team's biggest achievements came about through working with the Learning Alliances to advocate for annual increases in sanitation funding. After years of prioritizing water over sanitation in Debre Birhan, the town administration increased its allocations for sanitation by 27% in 2020 and by 56% in 2021. The town administration, as well as private actors, also mobilized funds for the procurement of land, the development of the fecal sludge disposal site, and the construction of shared latrines.
As you've heard some of these, we invite you to ask questions again in either the chat or the Q&A tab so that we can ask our partners those questions later. We now turn, though, to challenges, because systems approaches to improve sustainability are not without their challenges. Our partners share challenges of balancing system strengthening and scaling their approaches with the need to collect evidence for learning and research, turnover of actors, and the length of time required to increase sustainability of service delivery. As we share some of these challenges and how we overcame them, we invite you to share the challenges you have faced when working with WASH systems in the chat. We start in Ethiopia, where our partner Betty, representing partner IRC, first shares the challenge of balancing learning and implementation, along with another common challenge, high turnover in government.
Since the project involves both system strengthening and research aspect, finding the right balance between the two is challenging. Government partners are more interested in interventions while development partners try to keep the balance. In the learning alliances, there is a high government staff turnover, which creates uncertainty on the sustainability of the learning alliances. We try to provide continuous coaching, orientation, and engaging multiple people from one institution to alleviate this challenge. In the actions research, there is a lack of balance between technology provision and government responding capacity to maintenance. Some interventions are beyond the capacity and mandate of the development partners and lead long period of time for government to respond.
Thanks. We now turn over to Kenya, where our colleague Cliff is sharing the similar challenge of turnover in Kenya and discusses how they strengthened government capacity in response to that challenge.
Some of the challenges that we experienced in Kitui are related to political interests, change of leadership, and the on-off cycles of NGO and donor-funded programs. These led to attrition of actors and also disrupted progress made towards creating a strong local coalition. To overcome these challenges, our work in Kitui deliberately sought to strengthen capacities of the Kitui County government. This is because the county is the one institution that is mandated to deliver water services, and secondly, the fact that it will be in the sector for the long term.
Finally, Lucia from Tetra Tech discusses the initial hesitancy to lead the learning alliances in Ethiopia.
In the beginning, the Learning Alliance members were hesitant to steer the Alliance's direction and activity. They depended on the hub to facilitate their meetings. Through building relationships with the members and facilitation and leadership training, the groups have increasingly taken the lead on coordination and have been empowered to raise the profile of priority issues such as difficult discussions around fecal sludge management.
Great. So please continue to add some of your challenges in the chat. Carl, are you seeing anything in the chat regarding challenges?
Yeah, we have a few here. One of the things that Harold Lockwood mentioned, which I think really resonated across our partnership, is that we need strong and credible local government leaders involved in the activities, such as the Learning Alliances, to really help support efforts. And this goes beyond just supporting policy and monitoring and those kinds of things. We really need them to be engaged. They're part of the process, and we can help really gain some lasting change. That was a great point by Harold. And certainly the points by Betty and Cliff about the challenge of turnover in government, keeping things consistent. Once we start to do an implementation program or project, make sure people are bought in and they're sticking around for the long term. Because it's very challenging to re-educate and kind of reinitiate folks when we have a lot of turnover in these types of groups and meetings that we're trying to convene. Those are two of the challenges we found so far in the chat.
Great. And I'm also seeing that Martin is talking about the challenge of focusing on systems change, which takes a lot of time amidst that immediate cry for services. Thank you all, and please continue to add those to the chat. We're going to turn now to some of the lessons learned. So our partnership has learned many things along the way, and we are so excited to share a few of these with you today, but many more throughout the weeks ahead. Similar to the challenges, we invite you to share your lessons learned in the chat. We're going to start with Liz from Wave Solutions in Uganda, who shares the importance of aid from start to scaling a professionalized service model and the need for aid coordination.
Aid is needed at the start to meet the cost of building a coherent system of responsibilities of private and public actors at ground level. It's also needed to finance growth of service provision to break-even scale and for temporary promotional discounts on fee payment for maintenance services. The key to viable professionalized maintenance is aid coordination. Currently, uncoordinated aid is reinforcing system failure.
Now, Betty from IRC Ethiopia discusses the importance of context in addition to the time that it takes to achieve sustainable results.
The level of commitment and effectiveness of the learning alliances depend on the context. That is, emergency, fragile context versus stable livelihood. There is a need to design asset management systems that fit the capacity and context of the government partners. An exhaustive and full package intervention is critical and demanding long period of time to see results. Master planning development process gives an opportunity to think, internalize, and understand WASH systems building blocks and how to strengthen them. It is also a great way to engage stakeholders.
We're now going to turn to Tetra Tech, where Lucia shares how evidence-based data was extremely important to gain support and enable progress in Ethiopia.
Our biggest learning has been in finding collaborative ways to demonstrate the value of using evidence-based data to convince stakeholders when identifying and agreeing on priorities, translating these into actions, and testing solutions. For example, the data collected by the Health Office on the management and conditions of communal and public toilets prompted the town's authorities to re-establish management committees and put in place monitoring systems to track the operational conditions of these facilities.
Finally, Cliff reiterates this need for evidence and demonstration projects in order to influence actors.
Our biggest learning from working in Kitui County over the last 4 years was that credible evidence and demonstration projects can play a key role in shaping local approaches and local programming to focus on sustainability. And they can also influence government and local WASH actors in the process of water policy reform.
Carl, have anybody been sharing lessons that they've learned?
We got a couple of lessons here. Another one, actually, Harold Lockwood mentioned, the practical example from Cambodia about building capacity of local government officials and leadership. This seems to be a key lesson learned across our partnership. We learned that, especially for professionalized maintenance, it's going to be a critical system component. make sure we have successful emergence of professionalized maintenance services. And I think this also ties into what Cliff was saying around demonstration projects and what WAVE and Fundifix have been doing in the field, really showing firsthand from a demonstration standpoint, as well as the point of scale up that Liz B had mentioned before. If we can show scale and demonstration projects and get officials to see those successes and the challenges and to understand what it takes to make them more sustainable, that's going to be real key to making sure we have sustained service delivery.
Absolutely. Please keep sharing those lessons learned as we continue through the day. We love learning from all of you. Right? So we hope that these lessons are providing a glimpse into the many lessons that we as a consortium are excited to share with you over the next 2 weeks. We also invite you to review our over 100 and growing products. They're growing by the day, which include items such as reports, blogs, videos, presentations, and papers that are available on our Global Waters website. Learn more by going to the SWS page on globalwaters.org. This is organized around our priority learning themes that we've discussed and will be sharing over the next 2 weeks, including systems understanding and engagement, which includes network analysis, the professionalized service models, and collaborative approaches. I'm now going to turn it back for our Chief of Party, Brittany.
Brittany, you're still on mute. I'm sorry.
We may be having some audio challenges with Brittany, so I'm going to just jump in and ask a question here for Cliff. What evidence was most effective at gaining support and influencing actors, and how did you present this, Cliff?
Thanks for your question, Amy. I hope you can hear me. One of the biggest observations that we made from working in Kitui over the last 4 or 5 years is the fact that evidence, number one, needs to be factual and it needs to be credible. Moving on, we completed a suite of analysis in Kitui to improve understanding of the Rune water sector. And an example I'll give is a county water audit, which entailed an assessment of water service quality for about 3,000 plus Rune water points in the county. And this evidence was based on facts, was based on observed performance of these Rune water points. And we shared this through our local coalition, Kitui Watch Forum, which comprises of government, private sector, NGOs, and even community members. We basically fed back this evidence to this group and debated it over a long period of time, over a year. And this was key in shifting the debates to the next level, moving away from infrastructure investments to service quality and service performance. Another example I would give is the demonstration of the Fundifix model in the county. Again, this was key because we set up an operation, a professionalized maintenance service provider, Fundifix, and worked in the county throughout the program period alongside the SWS research work. And we shared performance of Fundifix work at the Watch Forum again to show both technically and financially how Fundifix was performing. Because this again was based on actual provision of the service, we saw it convince a lot of actors on the issues affecting Rune water functionality and maintenance and sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. I think we have some questions from Naomi and Hannah to maybe Lucia, you can first answer this question. To what extent do you think that the learning alliances are going to continue beyond the end of SWS?
Thanks for that question. So the Kitui WASH Forum is convened by the Kitui County government. SWS came in to support the forum, support the structures, support with evidence. Beyond SWS, then the forum will continue because the convener is the Kitui County government. It's not SWS. To that effect, the county government has put in place measures to secure long-term sustainability of the forum. Number one, there has been a short-term measure of allocating funding from internally within the county government to support meetings, cost of the meetings. I would also say that it now has a secretariat that is primarily composed of county government members, senior county government staff. And also say that for the long term, the county government has ensured that the WASH Forum is institutionalized within the county water bill that emerged largely influenced by SWS work. So the bill aims to allocate resources for operationalizing the forum. It also identifies a clear role of the WASH Forum, mostly providing advisory to the county government and also coordination of actors to make sure that interventions support sustainability. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Cliff.
I'd love to hear across the panelists about that question too. I mean, that seems like a really key question. Maybe Lucia, do you have a response to that? How do you, think you'll make this more sustainable after SWS, especially looking at all the work you've done so far?
Perhaps the best example we have of this is in Debre Bahan. I think the Learning Alliance is able to sort of demonstrate its value to the town administration, to the municipality, and through this, perhaps I can give the example of they were able to increase their budget allocations, for 2 years running, and so what we have now seen is, and we did push for this, is to sort to institutionalize the Learning Alliance. I think Cliff makes a very good point. Whereas Fundy-Picks University of Oxford came in and found this existing structure, SWS helped establish this structure in Debre Bahan, but we understood that this needed to be institutionalized, within the local government for it to continue, beyond the project. And what we have seen so far is, the stakeholders themselves taking responsibility to identify different actors within the government. For example, the utility and the Ministry of Health taking a role in who will be chair versus co-chair, identifying who will be the secretariat, but also allocating budget for the Learning Alliance's activity in the next year. So we have a slightly different story to tell with regards to sustainability beyond the project.
Betty, would you be able to answer that same question about the sustainability? We may be having some challenges with Betty. So perhaps we can go to Liz. Have you seen evidence that NGOs and charities may change their behaviors that undermine sustainable systems for maintenance?
Hi, Amy. Yes, thank you for the question. Yeah, we've seen evidence of that happening because already we are part of a forum of professional raw water service delivery organizations, and some of them are already implementing professional service delivery and contracting local mechanics and basically buying into the whole system of having a coordinated approach to raw water service delivery, as opposed to everyone doing their own thing, and in the end we don't have any actual results happening.
So slowly by slowly, it's starting to happen, and NGOs are picking it up. But for it to be sustainable and successful, of course, we need big funders like the USAID and many others to also coordinate their efforts towards, facilitating one monitoring and evaluation facilitator instead of financing piecemeal interventions. That's what would really help in the end, because aid is a very big part of it, at least at the start, when you need to replace broken systems and you need to build understanding and you need to do promotional pricing for the rural communities so they can also understand and appreciate reliable functionality. Yeah, but we are seeing NGOs come on board slowly by slowly. Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Hopefully everyone can hear me and my audio issues are resolved. Let's see if Betty's audio issues are resolved. Betty, are you able to come off mute and address this question?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Yeah. So I was saying that there is commitment from most of the learning alliances in our part, even after the closeout. We can't know for sure, but we know that they understand the need for these learning platforms, and if they understand the need, then there is hope that they will continue even after the closeout.
Thanks, Betty. So we've gotten a lot of questions on turnover in the chat. I think this might be a question we'll start off with Cliff on how you address turnover, and a specific question on whether training and capacity development of local government staff helps to decrease staff turnover, or do they just get poached by NGOs and the national government?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So we observed turnover throughout the program. First, I think a big challenge was the fact that the county government team was fairly aged. So there were a number of what I would call retirement, and then also reassignment of duties within the county government. So transfers to new locations and duty stations and all that. So that had an implication in terms of sustaining the conversation. So when someone moves, then you face the risk that there was no proper handover, and the historical memory, the institutional memory is lost. So some of the measures we took was, number one, to highlight the issue. So we completed a number of analyses to improve understanding of the local coalition. I would flag the organizational network analysis, ONA, that was part of the SWS approaches. And through the ONA, we showed that we were having instances of up to 40% change in staffing, and that basically was destabilizing the local network, the interactions and key relationships within the Kitui Watch Forum. So we highlighted that to the county government with the hope of getting a much more stable structure. The other thing that we also discussed to that effect is on how that could be stabilized, and also ensure that there is proper handover measures whenever you're having staff move. For the Watch Forum, we also discussed how the different organizations, that the government, NGOs, private sector should be sending or could be sending senior level representatives for meetings, so that then you also have that level of stability, as opposed to a junior staff every time who after a few months will move on to a new job. So it was what I'd call multifaceted sort of discussion and engagement at the Watch Forum and with government to see how we could stabilize things. I mean, at a program level, we also focus so much on making sure that we were not strengthening an individual, but an institution. So our activities, our lessons, our discussions were with an institution, not necessarily an individual, so that then you would expect that the institution carries on and advances whatever discussions that you have. Thank you.
Great, and I'll also offer Liz B, the opportunity to respond. I know this is an issue for WAVE as well, so any thoughts on how to address turnover in your districts?
Yeah, so in addition to what Cliff has shared, one of the things that we did, because our turnover was more related to political position turnover, the person that whose understanding has improved then is voted out, and then there's this new person who's only used to reactive maintenance, and they're used to telling the voters, you know, vote me in power, I'm going to give you a new borehole. And it's been a very big problem for us. But one of the things that we've been doing is harnessing community, let's say what we call it, customer satisfaction, because the communities that we work in really appreciate reliable access to safe water because their hand pumps are not broken. We start by overhauling the system and putting in quality spare parts, and then we contract local hand pump mechanics to do regular checks and also to replace any parts which are showing signs of breaking down soon. And they respond immediately in case there's a breakdown. So communities began to understand that this was a good system, and they were recruiting their neighboring communities and also telling, we had a few cases of communities telling politicians, no, we're not going to agree for you to pay for one-time repair. Contribute for us through the professional service provider because it's been working for us, rather than having one-time repair that's going to break down shortly and then no one is going to help us. So yeah, harnessing the power of customer satisfaction has been great for us, in addition to everything that Cliff has been saying.
Great, thanks, Liz. And this will be a big topic of discussion during our collective action session. So we do have two questions related to gaining commitment from actors. One is on how to get actors to prioritize systems, not just direct service provision. And then a second related question is how to gain commitment, considering that systems level results take so much time. So, you know, often we're not seeing results until, you know, 5-10 years out. Maybe let's start with Betty. What are your thoughts on how to gain commitment considering these long time frames?
Yeah, okay. Can you hear me? Just checking.
Yes.
So, for us, it actually begins at the beginning of the project, where we carefully identify different partners like Lowland Wash, which are implementation projects. And with Lowland Wash and district government, we were able to develop a joint plan that helped with commitment of the district government. We also did ground with districts and with the districts, and something that they could be interested in. One of the main entry points we used was asset inventory, which was done in collaboration with the district, using mostly district water office staff for data collection. We also had different experience sharing activities within the country and with Uganda on operation and maintenance arrangement, which increased the engagement of regional and national actors and their interests. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Lucia, I think a question for you on this topic. Are there any specific systems tools such as ship flow diagram or SFD that can help local governments and stakeholders prioritize and engage in a topic that they would often prefer to avoid?
Sorry, Brittany, can you repeat that question?
Yes, absolutely. Question coming in, and this kind of builds off of a good comment from Lewis on whether there are any specific systems tools such as ship flow diagram or SFD that can help local governments and stakeholders prioritize and engage in a topic that they might prefer to avoid otherwise.
I must admit, actually, the only one that really comes to mind is the ship flow diagram. I think just the value, the power it has in allowing people to visualize, you know, the flows through their town, and to generate that sort of uncomfortable discussion. I I can't think of any other than that one. We used various sort of, analytical tools, but the ship flow diagram, I think, hands down, was probably the most effective in both towns. So I'm afraid I can't give you a better answer.
Great. And maybe we can also hear from some of our other panelists on whether there are any tools for rural water maintenance. For example, I know that IRC conducted an asset inventory in South Ari. Betty, are you able to speak to that?
The different tools we used, or just the asset inventory?
Yes, specific tools to help local governments and stakeholders prioritize and engage in a topic. So specifically for rural water maintenance, if you can talk to the asset inventory and any other related tools.
Yeah, so at the beginning, we did like 7 different assessments. So the first one was the asset inventory and the service level assessment, which actually helped the district see what really is happening in their districts. So that was a really good entry point. From that, we also conducted network analysis, factor analysis, and also life cycle cost analysis, which helped with budgeting and understanding the financing gap in the districts. From those, we were able to also do an assessment, a building block assessment of the 10 or 9 different system building blocks we used in IRC. That also helped with prioritizing which areas to concentrate on, like operation and maintenance, monitoring, and planning, which led us to the development of the district wash master plans in the wards.
Thanks, Betty. And we have a related question in the chat on, so one thing we've discussed is how system strengthening requires good detailed systems analyses. Someone wants to know what our recommendations are for an implementing agency to avoid analysis paralysis, which is a very real thing. So I will turn it over to maybe Carl first, and then Amy if she has anything to add from the UCB perspective.
Yeah, all the work we're doing, we're trying to be as rigorous as possible from an academic standpoint as well, but we realize when we actually get into the field with our partners, we have to really make sure tools are accessible on a widespread basis and understandable. And I think we've learned a lot from that perspective on how to make them more adaptable to local contexts. And all the good intentions that a lot of times we've had, we learn a lot by working with our partners in the field to make them actually more implementable and more effective. So I'm sure Amy has some reflections on that as well.
Yeah, I was going to say something similar. And like our partners, it takes a lot of time to work together in partnership to develop something that's really going to be usable. And so I think that we learned a little bit about that, because at the beginning we set out with a lot of different analysis tools to implement, and we really refined those and developed them with the partners to be usable with that time. So we do have a lot of tools and recommendations for those different approaches. For instance, in network analysis, it was really great to have those visualizations and those mapping exercises with discussions so that people could see who is part of and engaged with that system. So that's just one example, and we have them for all of our different analyses and tools.
And that said, Amy, I think it's also important for policymakers and folks at kind of higher levels to see the academic rigor of some of these things as well. And we do want to make sure we translate that into documentation that people can feel is really strong evidence that's peer reviewed, that USAID can take and say this is really past muster from a lot of experts all over the world who reviewed these types of approaches. And I think it's important that we do that as well in parallel with actually making things usable. So I really want to emphasize that too.
Absolutely. Thanks, Carl.
Let's turn now a little bit to talking about service provision. And we had a question in the chat on, did focusing on service provision to consumers successfully motivate support from households, such as willingness to pay and signing or retaining contracts, as opposed to only providing access to the resources? Let's hear first from Cliff, and then we'll see if Liz has anything to add on.
Thanks for that question. So, I mean, at Fundifix, our approach has largely been marketing the service quality, a renewable drinking water service for communities, and by showing that we can deliver, that we can fix room water points within 3 to 5 days, then communities value that. They incentivize, they want to enroll, to register for our services. Because the alternative is, again, a scheme breaks down and it takes over a month to fix, with serious implications in terms of things like distances and time and quality of the alternative water sources. So I would say more generally, yes. If you provide a good service, if you provide a reliable service, then communities will be willing to engage, and they will be willing to pay for the service. That being said, I think that it's a system in itself. It's more complex than that, and there are so many other dynamics involved, including things like the quality of water. So some of the sources that we maintain have high saline water. So for such sources, then communities will have a much lower willingness to pay for the service. So there are so many other dynamics involved.
Thanks, Cliff. Liz, do you have anything to add?
Cliff has said almost everything. Yeah, what I can add is very small. It's that in the communities where we work, most of them have gone months, years without a reliable service. They have broken hand pumps and they're not working. And when they do, like I mentioned earlier, when they do get help, it's a one-time repair and then it's back to a broken hand pump. So showing them that it's actually possible to go a full year without having to draw water from a contaminated source, it's a very big sell for us, especially we've even had communities willing to pay higher than others if there are smaller households, number of households sharing a water source, because they also get tired of having to draw contaminated water. So selling them on reliability is a very big deal for us in the over 700 communities that we're working in.
Great. We do have a few other questions that have come in on professionalized maintenance models. So I will go ahead and ask Cliff and Liz one more question each on this topic. Cliff, what recommendations for the wider sector do you have about pay for performance or performance-based funding as a finance mechanism?
Yeah, my quick answer is that that's the way forward. That's what donors should start embracing, because number one, it focuses on service delivery, so it focuses on service quality. Instead of paying for pipes and tanks and taps, then you're paying for a reliable water service. The other importance of payment by result models is the fact that it also incentivizes private sector participation in the rural water sector, especially. We've found it very difficult to talk about commercial viability in the rural side, purely funded by tariffs. And what we realize is that you need some level of funding. And I think that that's largely agreeable. And by sharing Fundifix performance with governments, with stakeholders, I think there is fairly good agreement that services need funding, especially if you're talking about meeting SDGs and providing a universal water service. So then the question becomes, how do you provide that funding in exchange for results, in exchange for performance? And so payment by results, I think, the way to go. From a service provider perspective, they also help secure my sort of commercial viability of my business as Fundifix, because then you have guaranteed funding as long as you perform. And so every day then our work becomes to focus on performance, not where funding is going to come from. And that I think is a big step, because we realize even with a good technical service or good technical performance, without funding, then you face serious limitations. Yeah, I would also say that performance-based funding is flexible. It allows private sector service providers to focus on investing on areas that are much more high yielding from a businessman point of view. So, I mean, you have flexible pot of resources that you can invest where you get most value. With the traditional funding, then you get funding that is tied to scope. That comes with a lot of limitations in terms of how you can better deliver services to communities. Thank you.
Thanks for that response. And I do also want to let our participants know that we'll look at financing professionalized maintenance specifically at the maintenance session next Monday. So if you want to hear more from Cliff and others, definitely stay tuned for that one. Over to you then, Liz, a question on, can you speak to how news media, for example, radio shows and newspapers, were used as an outlet to strengthen WASH systems in your implementation districts in Uganda? And Liz, you are muted.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Brittany. Yeah, so first of all, we had public-private partnership platforms. These were quarterly review meetings that we held with district local government, and there's also attendance from for representatives of Ministry of Water and Environment and hand pump mechanics, where we discussed and had action plans, and we discussed role sharing, and we discussed how to get more communities on board, how to scale the service every quarter for at least since 2017. And this went a long way in building buy-in of all stakeholders and making sure everyone was coordinated in their role, so that we didn't have a clash in the way we were approaching rural water maintenance. And then we also had radio programs, because a big number of our recipients and stakeholders listen to radio, like local government and communities. So we had radio programs where we would have local government representatives, and that was a really big deal for us, because having local government speak authoritatively and say to communities, actually, this is a very good system, and also guarantee that it's going to work for them. That went a really long way in building community buy-in, because these were people that they trusted. Then the other thing, we also had radio spot messages. These were like short messages saying, hey, you should buy into preventive maintenance, because you're going to have a reliable service, and you're never going to have to go back to a stagnant water source. And then we'd provide a toll-free number where communities could call and ask more questions. And then we also had, from that, we had some communities walking in and recommending their neighbors to the service. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Liz. We'll shift gears here a little bit, and we got a good question in the chat on what unintended consequences have been experienced by the implementing partners, and how have these been addressed. I will turn first to Lucia to see if you have a response. Lucia, one obvious one that comes to mind is COVID.
Yes, COVID happened, and it affected all activities. Everything came to a standstill. I should say, though, initially, I think before we realized the seriousness of it, before the government of Ethiopia, put in restrictions on social gatherings, our members of our learning alliances, their focus was shifted, and priorities were shifted, obviously, to addressing this in their towns. And one of the things that happened was, the project responded by repurposing its activities. So the government of Ethiopia had implemented or was carrying out some sort of COVID prevention and mitigation training at national level that was meant to be rolled out to the subnational levels. And where SWS stepped in was, we diverted resources in terms of time and funding to being able to help our towns carry out this training, cascade this training, to their local government, to their community level. One other thing that did happen was, when the restrictions did come in place in terms of social gatherings, was we had to maintain, these were relationships that we had been building with our members in the two towns. And so we had to find a way, we had to be creative and, how do we maintain the relationship, without having the face-to-face contact. And it was through creating Telegraph chat lines, through creating WhatsApp chat lines, And also, keeping those open to not answer specific SWS related questions, but real-time questions about, COVID and what was happening in the towns. And we were in a position where often we are sitting in Addis, and what information was getting to us before it got to our towns, and being able to use these chats to funnel this information. So yes, COVID, I would say COVID was the biggest thing that happened to us.
Great, and I'm sure we could have a very long discussion on COVID. Let's hear maybe from Cliff on this same question, and we did have a related question come in from Yassine on how climate change affected WASH interventions in project areas. Can you speak to that at all?
Yes, thanks for that question. So I'll start with COVID. So we saw a number of disruptions. And from a maintenance service provider point of view, one of the things that we witnessed was the disruption of supply chains for parts. So it was a bit expensive to get products from our suppliers. It took longer because of the international, again, supply chains being disrupted. We also saw increased cost of parts. So basically, the cost of providing a reliable service went up with an implication on our costs. On a positive note, within the communities that we serve, there was increased communication and awareness on the importance of things like hand washing. We saw emergence of programs supporting water access and hand washing as well. So especially for schools, I would say the situation has changed from when we did a study in 2019 that showed, a significant lack of hand washing practices in some of these institutions. We also saw a disruption at the county level and engagement with our partners. We could not hold in-person meetings because of the social distancing requirements and prevention measures. So we were not able to hold any local coalition meetings like the WASH Forum. It was not possible to engage higher level leaders like the water minister at the county. The county assembly or the county parliament did not meet, and also the government executive team did not meet to debate government matters, which slowed things like the Kitui policy process down. From the broader sector, as I said, there was significant attention to hand washing. Unfortunately, other emerging challenges to that effect is the fact that now the hand washing stations are starting to break down because there was no maintenance plan or program in place when they were brought in. So again, need to focus on greater and long-term sustainability of some of these initiatives and services. We work in Kitui, coming back to your question on climate change. So we work in Kitui, which is one of the ASAL counties in Kenya, arid counties in Kenya. And like right now, we're in the middle of a national drought and an emergency that has significantly impacted, especially the rural households. We are seeing much more frequent breakdown of our community water points. We are seeing longer distances, especially where you don't have maintenance programs. We are seeing people, having to rely a lot more on unsafe sources for their drinking needs. And so I would see professionalized maintenance as one of the answers to climate change risks and challenges. Having a system that makes sure that when a source is broken, then it's fixed within 2 to 3 days could significantly boost the resilience of communities in terms of drinking water access and help them basically manage through a drought season. We've seen, we completed a sort of analysis within communities and schools as part of SWS work as well. And for the schools, what we saw was great reliance on rainwater harvesting systems for drinking water supply, with the assumption that the moment you have a gutter system and a storage tank in place, then the kids will have safe and reliable water access. But actually, extensive work in partnership with the REACH program, which is funded by DFID in Kitui, shows that while you have a rainwater harvesting system, collecting the water, most of the time the storage is not enough to last throughout the dry season. So just having a rainwater harvesting system does not guarantee renewable water access. The other challenge is maintenance of these systems. Most of them will break down, and for a minor issue, they'll be non-functional over a long period of time. We've plenty of storage tanks in schools in disuse because the teacher does not know where to get a technician or how to fix a small leak. So you still need maintenance systems for these systems. You need to put in place mechanisms that will make sure that schools continue to use these facilities or this infrastructure. The other is to do with contamination. Often, water from different sources is mixed into these tanks, and as part of coping mechanisms, some households will provide water from home to their children to take to school. So it's all mixed in one container, introducing new risks. So again, you have to look at water quality more keenly. Just providing a system does not guarantee safety. There are other risks around also having, roof systems that are that expose the water storage system to contamination. And I think, to summarize, I would say that then you need to look at water safety in addition to other aspects around renewability. Thank you.
Thanks, Cliff. So we've got a little under 10 minutes left. We've gotten some really good questions on technology, on gender. We will, for questions we are not able to answer in session, we will be answering some of those via a weekly recap we're going to be sending. So I think we're going to transition to our final question here, and this is going to be a question for all of our panelists. It's a good one. Could each of you give examples of the specific benefits of a systems-wide approach and why this approach deserves investment of the needed time and resources? Who would like to start? Should we start with Lucia? And you'll just want to unmute.
Sorry, I've actually been sitting here mulling this one and writing it. Specific benefits of the system-wide approach. I think I'm going to perhaps give a rather broad answer, which is, not underestimating the value in being able to bring the different actors together and bring them on the same page, to get them on the same page, to get them to have, this shared vision. And I guess the example I can think of is specifically, again, around the fecal sludge management in the two towns. In one of our towns, the process has come to a standstill prior to the project, where the actor who was meant to take the lead on it had essentially not stepped up to that role. And using the sort of system-wide approach to get all the actors on the same page, to reopen that discussion, even if they are uncomfortable, and in some cases getting the actors to challenge each other, got them back on track. And I'm sorry, I can't think of the actual specifics, but I'm hoping that somehow responds to this about, the value of having this. It's the dialogue that it creates. I think we have previously focused on hardware or technology as the fix to sanitation. And we're coming in and saying that, and asking that, we bring the local actors together, we bring the government together, we bring the users to be part of that discussion, and it certainly opened that door for us in Waliso with reopening a conversation about the fecal sludge, being able to allocate funding for fecal sludge, being able to allocate funding to procure a site for fecal sludge management in Waliso.
Thanks, Lucia. Liz, do you have anything to add on to this question?
Yeah, I'm going to answer it from a professionalized maintenance system perspective. So a systems approach for us means that everyone is coordinated, and because they are coordinated, then there's sustainability. So this means for local government, which is one of the stakeholders, it means that they have a smaller list of broken hand pumps that they have to deal with on a yearly basis with limited funding, with a small budget to deal with all of them. Then for the local hand pump mechanics that we contract for the job, it means that they have a sustainable source of income because we pay them for functionality. We pay them to keep the hand pumps working rather than responding to a breakdown. Then for rural communities, it means that they have reliable access to safe water. And for politicians, it means that they have to make fewer out-of-pocket payments for recurring one-time repairs because communities constantly go to them asking them to repair their boreholes. Then for funders, for donors, and it means that there's realization of socio-economic gains from investing in rural water service delivery instead of, putting in more money into, one-time big repairs, funding local NGOs, and then in the end, no one is actually getting reliable access to safe water. So yeah, that's what I can say about that.
Great, thanks, Liz. So I'll give Cliff an opportunity to respond, and then we can end with Carl and Amy on this question.
Yeah, thanks. So again, from a professionalized maintenance theme, just to answer your question, I think the implication is that then the value is that you're able to view service delivery from a different lens, from a different angle. Traditionally, it's been assumed that the moment you put up a hand pump or a pipe system, then people have water. But a few years down the line, then that's not the case. So a systems approach allows you to look at other factors beyond just infrastructure, most of which have been mentioned here, including things like monitoring, regulation, funding, sector coordination, institutions and their capacities, among so many other factors. And the implication there is also the fact that through that approach, then you're able to also look at the players of the game. So who are the actors? And are they working together? Are they setting local priorities together? So from our work in Kitui, I would say our systems approach has helped us to build a strong local coalition, a local coalition that brings together the different players in the water sector, and one that is able to sit and debate issues and agree these are the key burning issues or priorities for the sector. But with that approach, then I have bigger trust that a more sustainable solution or a more long-term solution is likely to emerge. Thank you.
I can start as well, Brittany. I think a good point was one that Sean just made Sean Fury in the chat about, are we talking about a sector-wide approach versus a systems-wide approach? And I feel like there's a big difference. I mean, the sector approach, you could bring all the sector together to have these discussions and engage them. But in the systems-wide approach, I really feel like we're bringing tools that we could learn more about the leverage points within the system and the connections between different actors, try to really understand where the investments should be made. And I think that's the difference in looking at systems approaches, is using systems analysis type tools. I think that's one of the unique things about our project, is we're trying to learn throughout the project, apply these tools, see what we find out, and then push some leverage points that we identify, whether it's engaging local government more, or just looking at different models for, say, maintenance provision, whatever that might be. We want to leverage that and push those leverage points, and then reassess and understand as we learn more and more how the system changes. I think that's the difference between looking at a systems approach. There's a lot of feedback there. It's not just like throwing a bunch of people in a room together. You have to talk to each other. We're really trying to help them see the connections between each other and learn about what the best ways to invest money and time and energy is, help move that whole system forward and understand it as a whole versus just a bunch of people coming together and talking. I'm sure Amy can elaborate this as well.
I had similar thoughts to Carl. I mean, that really goes back to our theory of change that we had talked about. So understanding that system, working together to determine what people are prioritizing, and who needs to work together, as well as those leverage points and how those work together, right? So this is combinations of factors that are really influencing sustainability of the system. And so that continual understanding together, I know our partners in here have been commenting, like John Butterworth was commenting on the combination of different levels of government are working together to improve, adapt, and change to really make that sustainable system and service delivery. And I think that is the system's thinking. It's continual with leverage points, combination of factors, and then that coordination of actors together that's making that change.
Okay, well, I would just like to thank all of our panelists for a very robust and thought-provoking discussion. And I think that you've hit on a lot of the topics we're going to be covering a lot more in depth the next 2 weeks. So given our audience a nice preview of what's still to come. So we can say goodbye to our panelists for now, and we have just a few more things we'd like to get through in the next. So we'll be pulling back up the slides in a moment, and I am going to be handing it over to Nicholas Valcourt. Nick is the co-founder of Open Water Systems, and he will be sharing a quick survey we'll be asking you to fill out today, and then again at the end of our closeout event to capture our own learning over the next 2 weeks. Over to you, Nick.
Okay, thanks, Brittany. So as you can see on the slide here, we just like to ask everyone to participate in a very short survey to help us explore how the attendees of these learning meetings conceptualize the different aspects of WASH systems. So there is only one question in the survey. It's shown here on this slide. It asks you to describe in a few sentences what you think are the most important factors and interactions for supporting sustainable WASH service delivery and why. If you can write a few sentences, a paragraph, it's going to really help us sort of understand different ways in which the participants kind of conceptualize these issues. So the moderators are adding a link to the survey now, as well as an interactive systems map that's on the Kumu platform, where we will be presenting these findings as your responses are submitted over the next 2 weeks of these learning meetings. So currently that systems map is composed of some example data from our study on local stakeholder understanding within SWS coalitions. You will see that you can explore that system by viewing different types of connections and factor groups. We also have another interactive dashboard showcasing data from our stakeholder understanding study that allows you to view how stakeholders conceptualize the cause and effects of both challenges, solutions to WASH service sustainability, and how those perspectives have shifted over the course of the project. Jeff Walters will be presenting more information about all that work tomorrow in the systems understanding session. So the moderators have put the links up there to the survey and the 2 interactive dashboards, and we hope that you just take a few minutes to share your perspectives with us on WASH systems. We'll be sending out an update on the responses in the week 2 learning note at the end of these sessions. And so we look forward to your responses and thank you for your participation. Now back to Brittany for an overview of the closeout event.
Thanks, Nick. And I do hope everyone will take just a minute or 2 after this event to quickly fill out that survey. So we can advance to the next slide, and I am going to bring us home for today. Next slide, please, Elizabeth. So Nick gave a little bit of a preview for our next session. This Wednesday, we have our first deep dive, and that will be on tools and methods to better map, assess, and engage with WASH systems and actor networks. If you're not already registered for the session, we'll drop the link to our event page in the chat. We'll have Jeff Walters, Rich Fromer, Angela Houston, 3 SWS partners presenting on some findings from SWS, and we have a really great panel of discussants that will be reacting to those findings. So trust me, you don't want to miss that one, and we hope to see you on Wednesday. And then, as I mentioned at the beginning of today's session, during this closeout event and learning series, we will also be sending 2 targeted emails to continue the conversation between these virtual sessions. On Tuesday, we'll send a tap into SWS learning email, and the purpose of this email will be to preview the topics we'll be covering during our deep dives. These will include things like short videos, blogs, and interactive dashboards, and are all designed to boost your knowledge on a topic in 5 minutes or less. On Fridays, we'll send a learning note to recap the week. These will include, among other things, a resource corner, links to presentations and recordings, and an FAQ section that will answer some of the questions we were not able to get to in session. So I would just like to extend my sincere thanks to all of our speakers today, as well as our attendees for your thoughtful questions and engagement the last 2 hours. This brings us to the end of our first session, but we do hope to see you at the remaining 4 over the next 2 weeks. And we provided here our email addresses for the leadership team, myself, Amy, and Carl, in case you would like to get in touch with us. So thank you again, and goodbye for now. Hope to see most of you on Wednesday.